Okay. All right, the floor is yours, Anna.
Great. Hi, everybody.
Hello.
My name is Anna McDonald, and I am the manager of the Workforce Center, the Goodwill Workforce Center in Lombard. If you need assistance with resume writing, applying for jobs, we could help you. We also have hiring events. They're like mini job fairs throughout the month. When you get registered with us, we send you the calendar of events. And then we also have employers that are looking for people. And so we try to get you connected with employers that are in our network as well. And so you could contact me at this email address, or even call me. So today we're going to talk about rejoining the workforce. You can interrupt me if you have a question, or you could wait at the end. It's up to you. I really, want this to be a discussion and not a lecture. But today we are talking about rejoining the workforce. So some of the topics and what you might learn is the first steps, clarifying your goals, your new resume, network, and interview discussions. So I think the first thing that you have to remember if you're rejoining the workforce or really in a job search is just to be confident in yourself. And sometimes, I think that part of kind of gaining that self-confidence is doing a reflection and really thinking about all of the great accomplishments that you have had in the past. Just think about people that maybe lack self-confidence or you've met in your lifetime and how that energy is just felt. And you can't bring that energy into a job interview. You have to really sell yourself because you have a brand and you're selling that brand. And so every action is a reflection of you. But there's steps that you could take, again, if you've been out of the workforce for a while, and maybe you're kind of lacking a little confidence in your skills. So I really encourage people to do this first step of reflection. And this is really being honest about your skills and really putting yourself in the day of the life of the job in the past. And really think about what were your strengths? What are you really good at? And that might be looking at some of your performance reviews or reaching out to former colleagues or a manager to kind of ask them, what did I excel at? What did you think that I did really well? And I think we're really, most of the time when I've done that or heard people talk about it, they're really shocked at what people see as a strength, and they never really thought about something they just do naturally as a strength. So really think about, what am I good at? What are the maybe letters of thanks that you got from customers or vendors or any stakeholders. But then you really also have to be honest about, what do I need to improve on? Is it technology? Is it Microsoft? A lot of companies now require individuals to be at least proficient in Outlook or Microsoft Word or Excel, and come up with a game plan or an action plan to turn that strength that weakness into a strength. And that might be going to the library. They have great resources, or you could come to us. But coming up with goals to get to that point to where this particular task or this strength that you need to work on, or this weakness that you need to work on, becomes a strength. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that in a moment. But really think about your behaviors and your values? What have been your behaviors in the past? And that's really what the interview is about. Who are you? How do you make decisions? How do you work with people? What's your behavior when you have to, when you come up against a hard place? What is your behavior when you're working with a difficult customer, or your behavior when you don't agree with your supervisor? And your values, do you believe in honesty, integrity? And companies have values. So really part of that search that you're doing is figuring out what are the values of a company, and are those values aligned with who you are, and asking value questions in the interview. Because maybe you might be working for a company where they might kind of encourage you to fib a little to the customer, but you believe in integrity and honesty, and that's not going to be a good fit for you. So really think about your behaviors, because what you've done in the past is how you're going to do it in the present and the future. So if you have a company, or you're interviewing for a company that, they have a certain level of integrity, or a level of how a customer is treated, and then as they're talking to you and trying to iron out your behaviors, they realize that maybe you don't treat customers the way we want customers to, be treated. And those are learned behaviors, and their companies don't exist to teach you values and behaviors. You come to them with those values and behaviors. And so they're making sure that everything is aligned with how they do things. And then your accomplishments. Really spend time thinking about your accomplishments, what you're proud of. And it's not just that 100% that you give, but that 120% that you give, maybe those little projects that you were given. Again, maybe letters from customers, and if you're talking about exceeding goals, how did you exceed that goal? Usually there are barriers to, accomplishments. How did you get over those barriers to get to that accomplishment? So you really need to spend time every day, with a cup of coffee and a piece of paper, and just really writing down everything that you've done in your jobs, and kind of putting yourself in that day, and who did you talk to, and what conversations did you have, and what reports did you provide, and what platforms, what programs, what databases did you use, and really writing it all down. I was actually having this conversation with somebody the other day, and they were in a job search and in the process of writing their resume, and they were sitting there watching TV, and their mind just kind of wandered to something. You're like, oh, that's right, I did this in this job. And she had a running list of things, and she got that pad of paper and wrote it down. So you really have to have everything down. And then after you write everything down, it's gonna fall into 4 buckets of transferable skills. It's gonna either be a communication skill, it's going to be an organizational skill, it's going to be an interpersonal skill, and it's going to be a leadership skill. And a lot of them are relative, and they kind of run and overlap with each other. But this is the biggest part of rejoining, or in a job search, is to really recall and reflect and think about everything that you've done going back 20 years. And then we just talked about the transferable skills. So the interpersonal skills is, you're responding to concerns, you're motivating people, assisting others, listening and influencing others. Organizational skills, multitasking, meeting deadlines, follow through, leadership, you're evaluating, you're persuading, you're initiating. And then communication, it's advising, explaining, translating, presenting, and articulating are just all kind of some definitions of each of these transferable skills. But when you're looking at a job description, sometimes they don't get into the nitty gritty of the job. They just say, we need somebody with communication skills. Well, you actually need more clarification, but this is some of the things that you could think about that you've done that revolve around communicating. You're advising somebody, explaining. That's a big part of communication. If you're in a call center, you're explaining procedures and policies, or articulating, because maybe you're talking to somebody that needs more clarification, or organizational skills, multitasking. Every job now, you're going to be multitasking. The phone's ringing, you're answering emails, you're getting interrupted, especially if you're looking for a position that's more of a receptionist, or in healthcare, they call it a patient access individual. There's multiple things happening at once, and for some people that's really hard to do. It's really hard for them to stop, go do something, and come back. They get really frustrated by that. So as you're recalling your last positions, think about that. Were you frustrated by that? Did it come easily to you? And then follow through, right? You're given a task and you follow through with it from beginning to end, and talk about, were you creating something? Were you working with the team, and then you were implementing, and then you were doing surveys? I mean, that's kind of the follow through as well. But the multitasking, you're going to see a lot of this on job descriptions lately, because jobs are you're juggling a lot of balls most of the time. Interpersonal skills, the interpersonal and the communication, like I said, they're really relative, and they kind of run into each other. You are, when you're communicating something to somebody, and that's where those interpersonal skills come in. And another part of interpersonal skills is empathy, having empathy for somebody. And that, you might see that on some job descriptions as well. But again, once you've come up with this master list of skills, put them into these different buckets of transferable skills. So when you're looking at the job description and you get ready to write that resume, when they talk about communication, you have a list of everything that you have done that revolves around communication. Technical skills, a lot of, obviously, jobs revolve around technology now, right? These are the power skills that we're talking about. So somebody that's looking for a receptionist job, a lot of companies don't have, phones anymore. All calls now are usually coming through a computer. So you've got, if your expectation now is to be a receptionist, but you don't have technical skills, can you really do the job? So you have to be realistic about your technical skills. And I would encourage you to, if you don't have LinkedIn, get on LinkedIn, reach out to somebody that maybe has a job title you have, and ask them about, what kind of skills you need, or if you're part of association or used to be part of association, and maybe you've been out of the workforce for a while, reach out to them and ask them, what are the new technical skills or the platforms or databases that are being used in this industry to get updated in those skills, or reskilled in the technology that they use in those industries. Look for classes. You can even go to our website here for Goodwill, the edu.gcfglobal.org. We have all kinds of tutorials and videos and quizzes that you could do there, and really all the Microsoft programs are on there. If you might qualify for funding to go back to school, so reach out to WorkNet. They might be able to give you funding to go to school. and get, certified or take some classes, to reskill you in these industry specific, technical skills. Check your attitude. So attitude's more important than skills sometimes. You might be a little down on yourself, or maybe you have started the job search and you're just not landing the jobs or the interviews, maybe in a higher level position that you had in the past. Or you're just frustrated in general about the job search, because really a lot has changed just in the last year on the applicant tracking systems, how resumes are written. A lot of employers are doing virtual or on-demand interviews, and it's really frustrating to get past all of this technology. So if you are getting the no's and not the yeses, don't bring that into the interview with the next employer. Don't let them see the frustration that you're having with the job search, because every interaction that you're having with an employer should be a new relationship. They don't know the frustrations that you've had, and it really is about attitude, because if you're bringing a negative attitude into the interview, that kind of represents who you are, and they don't want negative people on their team. They're really looking for people with positive attitudes. Again, everything that you do is a reflection of who you are in that job search. So don't bring this luggage into the interview. I thought that this was really interesting, that the CEO of the LaSalle Network said it's a good thing to lose your ego before hitting the job search. It's not about the money or the title, although money is good. It's about getting practical work experience. If you've been out of the workforce for a while, you might have to start at a lower pay or a lower title, and then prove yourself and work your way up. It just might be the reality. So don't let this ego get in the way of finding the job with a company that might have the position that you're looking for. And it's going to come with some hard work, but again, it's all about your self-esteem and being positive, not taking it personally, right? We just talked about that. Learn from the experience and move forward. So if you are having issues in the interview, answering some questions, at the end of the interview, if you feel like, you've kind of messed up on that, make sure to go back, research the question, and come up with a better response. Or, you could do mock interviews with the Workforce Center. We're happy to help you with that as well. Do what you can in that moment, learn from the experience, change your behavior, change the answer to the question, and then move on. Put it behind you. Always, trying to think ahead and moving forward, is really the best thing that you could do in this job search. It's critical to know what you want. And I asked that question, why? Why do you think that it's critical to know what you want? And it's because looking for a full-time job is a full-time job, and you need to have a goal. You need to have a schedule every day. You need to really come up with a plan, and what kind of positions you're looking for, what industry, and narrow down that search. So you're not spinning your wheels. You should have, everybody should have maybe 10 to 20 employers that they really want to work for, and target those companies, or the particular industry that you're interested in. But you really need to come up with a game plan in the interview, because in the job search, because it's really time consuming, and you don't want to waste any time, because positions, they don't stay up forever, they get filled. So be strategic every day about what employers are going to be applying for. What does that schedule look like for the day? Are you more productive in the morning or the afternoon? But come up with a game plan. Spend every day reflecting on your previous positions. You should always be in reflection mode, not just at the beginning. Like I talked about earlier, you might be watching something or driving somewhere, and it just kind of automatically appears like, oh, that's right, I did this or did that. So always be in reflection mode. Spend time every day searching for positions, completing applications. If you're in a full-time, if you're looking for full-time work, you really need to be filling out 5 to 10 jobs a week. I know that's a lot, but it really is a numbers game. The applicant tracking system, it's really complicated. And they say 75% of people that apply kind of go into this black hole. So that's why it's really important to make sure you have a really good resume that's really aligned with the resume. Make sure, and this is really another discussion, but make sure on your resume that you are typing directly on a Word document. Don't use headers, don't use footers, don't use columns, don't use text boxes, because the applicant tracking system cannot read that. And remember, everything that you do in the job search, even applying online, is a reflection of you. So if you're applying for a position that says you have to have attention to detail and you have an incomplete application, maybe it just the application didn't download your phone number or your email, that's really a reflection of your attention to detail when you're applying for a position that says attention to detail. That shouldn't get through your hands. You need to look for all of those errors and make sure that there's no gaps on your resume. The gaps aren't seen on the application. So again, you have to spend time every day looking and making sure that when you do apply, the application is complete. But it's really important too to have downtime, because it's so stressful. Make sure that you exercise, you eat well, you meditate, whatever it is that helps you with stress. Hopefully it's not drinking, but that you're eating well, you're taking, you're catching your breath, walking the dog, being with your family, getting away from it for a while and then coming back to it and starting all over again. And maybe that means, taking the weekends off too. So, don't get overstressed by it, but you really have to find time for yourself. And practice whatever those exercises are that helps you, to relieve stress. So the resume, we're going to talk more about that. We're going to talk more about the applicant tracking system. So for those that are familiar with the ATS, or the applicant tracking system, just briefly, it has 2 functions and 2 purposes. First, it manages the candidate applications for the employer that is offering these positions. It helps them determine who was a good fit for the position. And then it also, once they find that good fit, it helps them filter out and who are the good fit, and then it has a function on there to send them an email, schedule interviews, and then schedule interviews with the hiring manager, or to filter out the wrong people and then close that profile. So it really is a way for employers to kind of sort out, who fits in the this position and who doesn't. It's by far not a good way to sort out people, because as I mentioned, there's a high percentage of people that get filtered out just because, you know, they're missing a phone number accidentally, or you know, it filters out the wrong people, which is kind of, it falls on the shoulders of the person looking for the job, because resumes are not a one size fits all. You really do have to tweak your resume for every job, so that it is a good fit and a good match with that job that you're applying for. So, you know, really look over the job descriptions to make sure it is aligned with your resume. So what happens then, once your application is downloaded into the, once your resume is downloaded into the applicant tracking system, what happens is that the software, it removes the formatting and it puts it into the different sections of the application. So every application has a section for your work experience, your education, and your contact information. Maybe it might have a skills section, and then it's, you know, it parses it into those spots. So when you start the application, you fill out, you know, you have probably a password and a login identification number or number, code, whatever it is. And then it will begin by saying, do you want to parse your resume? So it's just a courtesy to you, so that you don't have to fill everything in manually. So you download the application that you want to use, and then it parses, or it puts it into each section of the application. It does not save the resume, because usually at the end of the application, that's where you're going to save the resume. But this is just, you know, it's supposed to be an opportunity to save some time by parsing or putting it into the different spots. But you really have to go back and make sure all the information was put in correctly. When I was looking for a job like 8 years ago, before working at Goodwill, I noticed that in the work experience section, it was pulling my contact information into there. So I had to go back and make sure I cleaned it up and deleted it. And, you know, as I said before, attention to detail, right? So if you're looking for a position that says you have to have attention to detail, and you miss this on your application, it really doesn't represent you well. So you really have to go back and make sure that all the information was put in correctly. Excuse me, I was, you know, a little thirsty here. And then, you know, if you are using text boxes, again, it doesn't translate well into the application. So, you know, if you have your contact information in that text box, and then you parse it, and you don't go back to look and make sure it was there, you know, how are they going to contact you if they have no contact information? So you really need to go back and make sure that you filled it out completely. And then once all that's done, what it does is it takes all of the information that you put in, and there's already been they did the algorithms to kind of figure out, you know, who's a good fit for this, and then it gives you a score. So the people with the higher scores get the callbacks. And yeah, they call them the buzzwords. But you want to go back, and really that's why I said earlier about the transferable skills, looking, because a lot of job descriptions do say communication. Excuse me. And communication can be many things. So you could be getting excuse me, scores for all the different adjectives for communication. so anyways, the people with the higher scores move forward in the review. And I really encourage you to go Google applicant tracking systems, look at YouTube, and get a behind the perspective of how that's done. And that will kind of give you an idea a little more about what those applicant tracking systems look like. Comparative skills. So I really encourage you to go to this website, philadelphiafed.org. There is a comparative skill section there. So what it does is it takes two occupations or job titles, and it compares them to tell you, okay, this is what's the commonality skills, and these are the skills that are not common between the two. For example, you know, maybe in the past you were a receptionist and now you're looking for being a medical health provider. So it's going to compare the two and say, okay, these are what is the highest level of power skills or soft skills that are used in each of these industries. So for example, communication would probably be high on there because in both professions, you're talking to people, you're working with people. And then maybe the lower skills between the two might be some of, you know, the technology like Epic that's used in healthcare, but as a receptionist, you might not have access to the Epic program. But anyways, I really encourage you to go to this website to compare the different job titles to see, you know, what were the similarities and the skills in both of those positions, so that you could, you know, write a better, more targeted resume for the position that you're applying for. So, you know, action verbs, you should have a lot of action verbs on your resume. So don't write anything in summary form in the employment section. You should have bullet points of what you've done or the skills that you have in the 7 skills that you have in each of those, you know, with those employers. And you begin that bullet point with an action verb. You know, arranged, adapted, corresponded, you know, assisted. These are some of the more stronger action verbs that you could use, but you could also Google action verbs for resumes and you get a complete list there. This will help you get past the applicant tracking system. And it reads better on a resume as well when you're using these action verbs on your resume. So briefly, this is kind of what a resume should look like. You could have your personal mission statement. I wouldn't put an objective or a summary that everybody uses. It doesn't make you stand out or be more competitive if you're using the same objective that, you know, I'm a go-getter, you know, I'm results driven, I'm detailed, I'm a team player. Everybody uses that. Make it more personal. Why are you applying for this position? You know, you could, you know, maybe have a mission statement of, you know, I enjoy working in healthcare, you know, and then a line about why, or use value statements. You know, use the value words of that company that you are applying for, your value words. Or you could use your, you know, elevator speech, you know, why to sell yourself or to brand yourself. This doesn't come easily. It's something that you're probably going to always be working on. But I would say if you don't have a good, strong mission statement, then don't even put anything on there. Don't put an objective. Because again, if it's the same objective everybody's using, how does that make you, you know, stand out amongst a crowd of other candidates? You know, the objective is to be better than the next person. How are you better than the next person if you have the same objective? So, you know, it's something you really have to work on. But then you go into your career experience, work experience, employment experience, whatever you want to put it. Then you start with the name of the employer, where they reside, and then on that same line in the far right section or column, the dates, just the month and the year to present or whenever that ended. And then the next row is your title, and then the bullet points, starting with strong action verbs. If you could quantify it, you really need to do that. You manage people, how many people, if you managed a warehouse, how many square feet, give them details. Don't, have them, they're not good at connecting the dots. You have to connect it for them to give them the big picture of what you've done. And they do 7, 8, no more than 8 bullet points, and then end with the accomplishments. What did you accomplish in this job? What do they really need to know in that industry that you excelled at? And then you move on to the next one and you go back 20 years. We're going to talk about gaps in a minute. And then your education, don't put dates on there. Just put where you went to high school. If you're running out of room, you really don't need to put the high school. You might have to put that in manually on the applicant tracking system. But for the resume, you don't necessarily need it right there if you have to, if you're running out of room. But the college, if you didn't go to college, then you really need to put the high school information. But college, vocational training, certifications, that could all go into the education section. So for gaps, it depends on what you're doing and what you want to fill in. If you're raising a family or a caregiver, really use the word caregiver. If you're caregiving for aging parents, a spouse, or even a family, treat it like an employment position. You're a caregiver for the Smith family, the dates, and then bullet points. And I would encourage you to go to Indeed and look at a caregiver job description or position and use those descriptions. You were transporting, safely. You're transporting your client safely. You were providing nutritional meals based on dietary needs. Making schedules. If you were making schedules, were you using Excel? You want to show them that you have these skills, and that these skills are really transferable to another position. If you weren't a caregiver, if you were maybe volunteering somewhere, put that in that space. It's a volunteer position, treat it like an employment position. If you have nothing to put in there, then highlight maybe taking classes at the library. They just want to know that you have skills to offer them. Are you employable? This might call for a greater conversation one-on-one, and I'm happy to help you do that. But there really should be something in there, and there probably can be something to fill the gap if you look. Don't use housewife. It kind of dates you. A family caretaker you could use. You could always refer to home management to minimize gaps in time spent as a homemaker. Fill the home management period with transferable skills relative to the target position. So if you were doing budgeting, you would put the budgeting experience, and you were using Excel or maybe some other software out there, communication, especially, like even for volunteer positions, you're probably working with the team. Talk about, working with the team. If you're leading the PTA or has some kind of leadership position, put that in there as well. If you were laid off, fill it with volunteer. You were taking classes, even the caregiving. mean, it's okay to say that you were laid off. I mean, employers understand that. And it's really important in that conversation not to show that you were aggravated or upset or resentful that you lost the job. Try to focus on the positive when you're having that conversation. Again, every action that you have represents who you are. So if you have a negative experience and now you're bringing this negative attitude into that position, they're going to see that, and you know what they're going to think. If you're doing this with this employer, you're going to do this with us. And so they want to keep that negativity out, because it really is, somebody with a negative attitude could really bring down a team. Hold on one second. You know, there's so much money that's spent by employers, and we're talking millions of dollars a year in unproductive work situations, because there's gossip going on, people are not focused on their work, then they have to bring a team in to, you know, mediate a conflict or training. And so that negative attitude, they see money when somebody comes in with a negative attitude, and they certainly don't want to put that person in the face of their customer, right? Because you represent that brand. So you really do have to be positive, even though you may have had a horrible experience with a previous employer. Networking is really important in the job search. You know, 80% of professional women find jobs through contacts. And, you know, employers right now are spending a lot of money on referral money for they're giving to their internal employees to go out and help them, you know, find family and friends that are looking for jobs. So maybe you might know somebody that works at a company you really want to work at, and ask them to be a referral for you. But go on LinkedIn too and network. Reach out to people that you worked with in the past. You know, ask them to make a referral for you. And also, recruiters are looking for people on LinkedIn. So make sure that there is a function on LinkedIn that lets people know, or lets recruiters know, that you are looking for a job. So, you know, networking is so important in the job search. You could join a professional group, join a civic group. Again, contact former managers and colleagues. You know, are you alumni from a college? Reach out to those alumni groups. They're always really happy to help too. And have a handbill. So a handbill is not a resume, and I would encourage you to look that up. But it's the only difference on between the resume and the handbill is that the handbill is more focused on accomplishments, and there's also a section on there, or you can put a section in of the top, you know, 10 employers that you really want to work with, so that when you're handing this handbill to somebody, maybe at a social networking group, you know, they see, you know, your accomplishments, and they see what companies that you're interested in, and maybe they know somebody that they could pass it off to as well. So if, you know, you haven't been in the workforce for a while, the interviews are a little different now. A lot of interviews are conducted online, virtually. So let's take time to talk about that. But first, you really need to practice, you know, practice talking about your employment gaps. You know, if you're asked why is there a gap in your resume, you know, why, you have, you know, an explanation. It's okay to say that, you know, you were in a position in your life where, you know, you didn't have to work, or you needed to take time off to care for an aging parent. There is such a huge demographic of people right now that had to leave jobs to take care of aging parents. And employers are okay with that. That's fine. But you you need to show transferable skills. Again, that's really, if you're taking care of an aging parent, you're probably having to deal with Medicare and Medicaid, and that requires being organized and having good communication skills. And maybe you had to, put it on an Excel spreadsheet to stay, focused and on schedule, and you could talk about that, because having the ability to use a spreadsheet in one position translates to another position. You're not unlearning how to use Microsoft. I mean, you come to them knowing how to use that, as an example. But practice answering that question of, why is there a gap? If you had, again, a bad experience with an employer, you need to have a positive response. And I can help you come up with that language. I do want to tell you that when you are having that conversation, you really need to pay attention to your facial expressions and your body language, because you might be saying one thing, but your body is saying another. And so the employer might want to dig a little deeper, because to them, it's obvious that what you're saying is not congruent with your body language. So again, I'm happy to help you come up with that language. Other interview questions, why do you want to work here? Which, a lot of people, like a lot of influencers that I follow on LinkedIn, think that this question is insulting. I don't feel like it is. I mean, I think it's a good question. Like, why do you want to work for this company? You just spent all this time with the application. Like, why us? And that's where you could talk about your passion for their product or their service or that position, that title. Because you're going to be spending a lot of time there. And if you're not applying for the position for the right reasons, you're not going to stay. So if you're only applying for money, which, we have to work, right? But if it's the salary that is what excites you, that's not enough to get you out of the job to go to work in the morning when there's problems to solve and barriers and maybe some conflict. That's not going to motivate you to give that 100%. So I feel like it's a good question. And I know a lot of employers that ask that question. Again, what do you know about the company? Who are their competitors? What are their challenges? I had an employer tell me once that, and it was an entry-level position for a linen company, they provide a laundry service. So it was the people actually cleaning the laundry. That's the position she was filling. And she said that, every person she asked, like, what do you know about what we do? Nobody knew what they did. So she decided that when she scheduled interviews with the applicants, she was going to send them information about the company and a link to the employer website. Well, she then asked the question again, and still nobody did the research. And so she decided, well, the next person that I talked to, who happened to come in dressed really nice, seemed to have a good vibe. She's like, this person's got to do something really dumb for me not to hire them. And this person came in and automatically started talking trash and horrible things about the company that they used to work for. So, but it's important to a company, like, what do you know about it? You've got to know something about that company. Tell me about yourself. This is where you kind of run off talking about your skills. They don't want to hear about your family or your vacation or your dog. That's where you start talking about the skills on your resume that are comparative to that job. So you could start talking, with the most recent position first on that resume, and then go through each of those positions and talk about, being successful and how it compares to this position that you're applying for. How do you handle difficult customers? They always want to know, how do you manage relationships? How do you manage situations where customers frustrated? Because there's probably always going to be those situations, and they need repeat business. And their customers are important to them because they're coming back, most likely. So if they're having a bad experience because you don't know how to handle a customer, they're going to go on social media and say a lot of bad things about them and their brand. And it's not possible most times for them, for the company, to, untarnish their reputation because this customer had a bad experience. So they want to make sure they're hiring people that understand the value of their customers. How did you handle situations where you didn't agree with your manager? Going forward now in this workforce, there's going to be a lot of change, right? And the next question, how do you manage change? So there's always going to be change in our jobs, and it's usually technology based, right? Companies have to be competitive to exist. So they have to be on top of things. They have to know what are the new things happening in the industry, which means that you're probably going to have to be upskilled. And they don't have time to deal with the Debbie Downers that, are going on about another change and blah, 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 blah. That brings everybody down. So, they want to know, are you flexible? Can you move fast when we have these changes? Or are you going to be that person that's going to be negative and bring everybody down? So these are some, I think, of the questions that we're seeing a lot, and you should really be able to answer well. So in the interview, you're probably first going to get a call, maybe an email to set up a phone interview. You need to always be looking at your emails twice a day and get on, and if you have somebody reaching out for an interview, you need to schedule it right away because they're moving on to the next person. So they might say, well, we want to do a live interview. That is a two-way interaction. So you are talking to somebody online, like we're doing now, right? And you need to be familiar with some of these platforms that they're using. And they're using Skype, Zoom, GoToMeetings, Microsoft. You really need to be familiar with these softwares or these platforms. So you could come here, you could go to the library. We're happy to educate you about that. Even do a mock interview online, so that you're comfortable, knowing how to work the audio and seeing yourself on camera and listening to yourself on camera. But you really need to be familiar with these live virtual interviews. The other kinds of interviews are the on-demand. So this is a one-way interaction. It's conducted on software, and some of these platforms are HireVue, JobVite, and Montage. So this is where you are being asked to go to these platforms to conduct an interview session on your own. So you're actually recording yourself answering predetermined interview questions. And then it sends it back to the employer to go and look at. And these are, you don't have the opportunity to ask any questions. It's timed. So this is where practicing interview questions is really important, because you will be timed and you'll only be given usually 2 minutes to record yourself answering the question. And if you don't answer the question in that time frame, then it's going to, just cut you off. So this is why, well, beyond this, but it's so important to practice interview questions just in general. What not to say, don't talk about salaries unless they bring it up. Maybe in the second or third interview, you might be able to, but definitely not in the first. It's just an introduction, just to see, they want to see you, they want to hear you, just to make sure you sound like you know what you're talking about, the job, right? And then, don't talk about how much you hate your last job, your employer, your coworkers. Don't ask about benefits or vacation. Don't talk about medical issues. So on the online application, there is a section for the EEOC questions, and those are the questions. Are you, your gender? They want to know if you've been in the military. They want to know if you have a disability. These are the EEOC questions, and on these online applications, they have, like this separate section that collects all of this information. And then every September, a report will go to the EEOC on how many males, females were hired, how many people were military were hired, because companies do get tax credits. So I think that people think because some of these disability questions are being asked, that the employer is privileged to this information, but they're not. So don't talk about medical issues. If you were out, if you have a gap because of a medical issue, you have to be really careful what you tell them, because they're thinking money, right? They're thinking, are you going to call in all the time? How is this going to affect our health care packages? They're worried about premiums. So be really careful about talking about that. Don't talk about, children, grandchildren. Don't talk about if you're an advanced age person. Don't talk about how we did it in the day. Don't talk to this person a condescending attitude, although you might be old enough to be their grandparent or their mother. Keep it cordial, respectful. Because there are a lot of different generations that are working together now. And I hear people talking about how they feel, and there is age discrimination, but it's nothing that obviously you talk about, and I think also in regards to the age issue, I don't think it's about people, of a younger age not wanting to be the leader or the manager of somebody of advanced age. I think the issue is employers are thinking about, are you going to stay? If it might to them feel like you might be close to retirement, they want people to stay. It's so costly to hire somebody. And then when you got somebody and they leave, that's another investment, and that's more money lost, because now we got to hire somebody. So you really have to convey that I'm going to stay here. I think really for anybody, you've got to show them you're committed to this employer for, at least 2 to 5 years. So be careful when you have those discussions too, with somebody that might, be younger than you. Some of the questions asked is, how soon are you looking to fill the position? Ask about the culture. What is it like to work here? If their value words are, we value our employees, well, ask them, your values are, you value employees. Please tell us how you value employees. Can you meet the team? Maybe that's the next step in the interview, is to actually meet the team. But it's okay to ask, who am I working with? Why is this position open? I think is really important. Is it a stepping stone to a greater position? Is it just a contract position? And so it will be over in a year. Is it because it's a revolving door and people don't like working there, so they're leaving and always having to refill the position? Opportunities for advancement. That's what they want to hear. You know, they want to know that you want to work hard and you want to, you know, show your worth and your value and be promoted. Make sure you get a business card too to send a thank you. It's really important to send an email thank you to everybody individually that you have talked to in the interview process. And, you know, questions show that you're paying attention and that you really are interested in the position. So just relax, stay positive, make sure you make eye contact, listen, tell the truth, keep your answers short to the point, really spend time practicing, and then ask questions. Here's some websites that you could go to, you know, if you were looking for maybe ways to fill the gap and you want to volunteer, you could go to Volunteer Match. If you're looking for some nonprofit jobs, you could go to Idealist, and they also have volunteer positions there. Chicago Cares also has volunteer positions, and One Good Deed Chicago also has volunteer opportunities there. What to bring to the interview, bring a notepad, your portfolio, a pen to, you know, write down maybe key phrases that they're using. Maybe everybody's using the same word. You know, you want to talk like them. So maybe everybody's using the word care. Use care in your discussion with them. Talk like them. Use their vernacular. Bring copies of your cover letter and resume just in case. Have a reference list in case they ask for it. Driver's license or passport, because maybe they want to do the I-9s right away. You have it right there. And TikToks, because if you're talking face to face to somebody in person, you don't want bad breath, right? So really, that's all the information I wanted to share with you about rejoining the workforce, what to expect. So it's really important, I can't say this enough, to really take time to reflect on you know, everything you've done in your jobs, all of your accomplishments, your strengths. Be honest about your weaknesses, and then, you know, practice interview questions. Be prepared to answer some of these hard questions. Time yourself doing it. If you need to do a mock interview, we're happy to help you with that. Be familiar giving virtual interviews. Be comfortable seeing yourself on camera and listening to yourself, and be positive. It's just so important to be positive in the interview. So that's the end of our presentation. I think we're going to stop recording and then going to spend time in a Q&A. Thank you.